What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome back to our Elden Ring coverage. In this episode, we're going to be leaving the Grand Library and making our way up north to the Caria Manor. Now, before you really do anything with this episode, the first thing we're going to do is hop back over to the Round Table Hold, because with both Godric and Rennala having been defeated, we can then go on over here and talk to the Finger Reader to unlock another talisman pouch. So go ahead and run through the dialogue. And there we go, our second talisman pouch, which with that, we now have a third talisman slot. So we can go on into our equipment and put on something that works for us. Now, you should already have this grace, as we grabbed it quite a few episodes ago, but if you don't, I'm quickly going to show how to make your way on up here, because this area is mildly hidden. Now, the easiest way would be from over here. You could just run on up and then make your way on north. But right here, this archway, this is actually a hidden wall. So when you get here, make sure to give it a swing. That will bust the wall open. And from there, you'll enter this area where you are next to the blacksmith. But as for the manor itself, we're going to go ahead, quickly just turn things to morning to make it easier to see. As we approach the manor, there is going to be a barrage of magical arrows that are falling from the sky. Now, these are relatively easy to avoid. You're going to see them coming. It's not like they're going to be heat-seeking missiles or anything. So you're just going to be dodging left or right. And you can try and, creep along the wall if you want, but these arrows are going to fall towards you regardless. So I find the easiest thing to do is to just make small adjustments, go left, go right, avoid them, and make your way towards the entrance of the manor. Now, the real reason that we want to make our way over to the manor is this is going to give us access to Ranni's questline, which is one of the longest quest lines in the game. It leads to a legendary weapon. It also leads to a couple legendary talismans, and just some nice NPCs, good interactions. Definitely a questline that's worth doing. So get on over here, rest. This is going to be our starting point for the Caria Manor. Now, the Caria Manor has a lot of enemies you haven't encountered before called finger creepers. You can see one right there above my head and one right there. These enemies are very grotesque. They're literally hands that are going to be crawling after you, but they are weak to fire. So using stuff like fire pots is very effective against them. We're going to go ahead and craft up 3 of those. Using fire grease, if you have any, is also very effective. So we're going to put some of that on. And we can use the fire to basically stun these enemies briefly and get off an attack or 2 on them. So briefly, just to talk about how we're going to go through this area. They are also in the ground. They're all over the place. So there's some loot like you can see over there, but there's lots of ambushes waiting to happen. So we are going to enter the manor. We're going to run over here. We're going to take this little path, and then we're going to cut across and make our way up. And that's going to avoid a lot of the potential ambushes. So even going this way, there is a finger creeper waiting for us. So we'll do a quick throwdown with this enemy, show how it works. We'll hit him with a firebomb. Now he's on the ground, hit him with one. Oh, no, didn't work. Hang on, one moment here. As you can see, they're very aggressive, very grabby. But if you get them burning, you can run up and get easy attacks on them. And that's where the fire pots are going to come into play. Go ahead and make some more. Would have plenty of materials to make those pots as needed. Got to pick up the Rhyme Crystal Bud. And we're going to hop up here. We're going to run inside to get ourselves a crafting book. Kill this one enemy. There's a lot of magical traps like that. For the most part, as long as you're not like standing still, they're not going to hurt you. But just something to be aware of in this area. They're essentially floor traps that are triggered by you running by them. Okay, we'll go over this way. Now it's burning, we'll run up and start getting some damage in. And it's not going to kill it outright, but the advantage of using the fire there is it stunned the finger creeper up enough that I was able to get a very big hit on top of him. and that's just going to make the encounter with them that much easier. So as we go over here, this enemy, try and approach it from the right, kind of how I just did to put it into a wall. And the reason for that is you can see right here, this is a finger creeper trap. So there's a smaller one. And just to show how this, I really don't want to trigger this, but just to give you an idea, let's see if we can get it to pop up. The idea is you run over it and they pop out and they grab you and then they do lots of damage to you. So very, very creepy enemies to deal with. Probably one of my most disliked enemies in the game. They're very, well, they're creepy. They're called finger creepers for a reason. But so from here, we can just head on up. There is some loose loot kind of over here that you can grab, but keep in mind there are 2 very large finger creepers that are waiting up above. So just something to be aware of. You don't want to be getting caught out. But so we're just going to follow this path. And we have one more finger creeper up ahead that we're actually going to just run on past, just because there's going to be a grace immediately after it. So if it starts charging up a magic spell, which is that, just be careful and time your roll. If that ends up connecting, it'll freeze you in place, and then the finger creeper will run on up and do some damage to you. You want to make your way up here. Go back here. Pick up a smithing stone. And over here we have a grace. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is actually grab one of the legendary armaments. So for this part, we're just going to be sprinting through. So we're going to sprint up to here, and then we're going to make a left, and then we're going to follow the path and then drop down. So turn in left here. And we're going to make a right. And what we're trying to do is get right on over to there, but this drop is a little bit far. So what I'd recommend doing is heading on over this way, jumping off right here. So I believe there's a stray item around this corner as well. Yeah. Go ahead and pick up that rune arc. Those are always useful to have. There we go. And continue on over to here. Drop on down. And you can take the ladder if you want, or just drop. Making it down here, we will open this up, which gives us the Sword of Night and Flame. Very useful weapon and one of the legendary armaments you need for the trophy. Now this will pop us right out into the courtyard. There's that that water feature that we were looking at earlier, so this gives you a shortcut if for some reason you want to explore the courtyard. But otherwise, hop back over to the manor lower level and we're going to continue. Now from here, this path is going to have a lot of illusion type enemies that are going to appear. You saw them briefly as we were running past. If you want, you can fight past them. They're not particularly difficult. They have about the same strength that a regular soldier would, so 2 to 3 swings depending on your weapon. You can also just run on past them, however. They're not going to be able to chase you, so just to show that, if you wanted, you could just run this way, and they're going to keep spawning in, but we can just ignore them. See, here's another one of those little traps. You can also jump off here if you want to go get some loot over there. No real key items, but you can jump on down and go over there if you want. Those curious how to reach that spot. Instead, we're going to make our way over to this elevator, and then we're going to head on to the upper portion of the Caria Manor. Go ahead and rest if you need to top off, otherwise we can just head on out. Gonna go ahead and kill this big wolf. And of course, don't forget every time you see one of these trees, there's a golden seed waiting for you. Go ahead and grab that. And then we're going to make our way over to this small set of stairs. There's actually some stray loots that are on the other side of this area, along with another wolf. Or the rest of the area. There's the other wolf, so if you want, feel free to explore. But as always, no key items, otherwise I would point it out. So we're going to go ahead and use a throwing knife, and that's going to get all 3 of these enemies to start coming towards us. This one will go on up solo. These 2 will take a second to come. As you can see, they're a little bit slower, but they'll get over here eventually. Alright. Now, you don't need to kill these enemies. You can sprint right past them, but they're pretty easy to defeat, so I would recommend just taking them out. Similar to the other trolls, 2 heavy attacks is all we're really going to need. Really mess this poor guy up. Oh, if I can get over the head. There we go. Oh, I didn't get the critical. That's okay. There we go. 2 more heavy attacks. There we go. A little bit tricky when they're on the stairs like that, just because of the elevation difference, but... give him a little spanking there. Now this enemy can drop the Troll Knight's Sword. I mentioned earlier about you might want to start putting some intelligence in, so you could use the Carian Knight Shield. This is another weapon that would require some intelligence. It's going to have the similar moveset to the Zweihander. Of course, it'll have Troll's Roar in it, and it has some magic damage baked in. So, pretty interesting weapon. Now, when you get up here, I'd suggest going to the right. There is an extra enemy that you can see right up there above my head. Whereas on this side, it's just 1 enemy, so it's just easier to approach. And we'll kill him. And right on in here is going to be the boss. Now before that, we're going to run on over here. I want to talk about a little side area that you can do. So looking on down, you can see some pots. And this will actually go to a right over there where that tower's at. Now, what you would want to do to make your way down there is just jump up here, jump down, and then make your way, continually go down. There's going to be a couple things you can get down there, one of them being a Ash of War for your weapon. You know what? Let's just actually show you. Why not? We're making good time this episode. None of this is considered a key item, but we're making good time, and I know it's easy to die on these long cliffs. So we're going to do a long jump here. Thing where we jump up and hold the sprint button. And we've made it on down. So there was a pot over here we can grab. That gives us access to 1 extra fire pot. It's considered just a container. So you can have up to 4 pots now instead of just 3, which is nice. Some more crystal darts. And you can see by just kind of looking over the ledge, you'll have an idea of how you take this path on down. There's a Ash of War down at the bottom, one that I don't personally consider to be very good, but maybe you'll end up enjoying it. It allows you to create a giant magical sword that you can charge and then swing. You can of course kill all these enemies as you're working your way down this path as well for some extra loot if you want. And then if you want, you can jump on up here, around a little bit more exploration. You can see this is that path where we were originally running. But either way, let us right back over here to the Manor upper level, and we're just going to run on over to the boss. So the next boss that we are fighting is called Royal Knight Loretta. This is an illusion of a separate boss that we can run into later, so we're not going to do a full breakdown guide. This boss is actually fairly simple, so we're just going to discuss it in real time and include it in the experience, because there's more to the Caria Manor after this boss that I want to cover in this episode. So right here, we're just going to run, stick to the right. And we're going to swing to the left a little and swing back to the right. And we'll shoot through his legs. So you can see it's pretty easy to make this run, which is good to know in the event that you do die to this boss. But for the most part, there are a couple of minor attacks to look out for. There is a great bow charge the boss will start doing. That can hit you fairly hard. Besides that, he's going to have small carrion shots similar to how the Red Wolf of Radagon summoned, so you already know how to dodge those. He also has smaller blasts he'll shoot on out at you. But for the most part, this fight isn't that difficult. I do think having the Cave Mercenary out or any Ashen Summon is going to be useful, just because he does tend to jump around a lot, and so having something that can just distract his attention while you can get some hits in is nice, but certainly not necessary. Unfortunately, even if you stagger him, you don't get a window to do an attack in. There's Loretta's Slash. That has a fair amount of damage it can do, but you know, nothing that this enemy does is incredibly dangerous. His Great Bow, perhaps, but that is a very long tail, and you may not even see that. Let me actually back off a little bit so you can... There's the Great Bow. If you see this, just roll out of the way. But as you can see, I mean, he's almost dead. Less health than the Red Wolf, and I would argue not nearly as dangerous. Some people actually like coming up here and taking out this enemy prior to doing the Academy. So we're a little bit ahead of the pack on killing poor Loretta here. Let Kate get the kill. But she'll get that Ash of War in addition to Loretta's Great Bow, and of course a Grace. So let's go ahead and see. I think we have enough to level. We can also add another charge to the flask. That's always nice. And we have taken off our previous talisman that boosted our stats. So get your endurance up a little bit higher to make sure you still have that medium roll. I'm actually going to take that up to about 25 just to have a little more juice in the tank. After taking him out, we're going to run on over here to the Three Sisters. And then you're going to mount, and you're going to follow this path, but you're going to be heading mainly south. Now you are going to see a dragon over there in the mist. You can choose to fight it, but the dragon does teleport away. At roughly 50 to 30%, it's going to be teleporting. We want to get right on over here, just to show exactly where we're at. We're making our way towards the manor lower level. Want to drop. Drop again. And drop again. And right here, if you look over the ledge, you see that we're able to drop another time. And another time. And another time. Now, you don't need to do this part, but there are some consumable items up here you can use for crafting, so just run on over and grab them. But the real reason we're doing this drop down is this ladder right here. Ladder, or you can drop. But this is that initial room where we had our Grace. You can see the Grace is right down over there. But over here we have a NPC that you're going to want to interact with for a couple reasons. One, he has a Ash of War that I strongly recommend you get. The other is he has some other items that are very nice. So here, Ash of War, Carian Retaliation. We're going to talk about this in just a moment, but go ahead and pick that up. You're absolutely going to want it. The Ritual Pot can be useful. This is for throwing objects like the bombs we have, but even bigger, stronger ones. Stuff like giant flame pots. So that is useful. The Celestial Dew is very important. In the event that you hit an NPC and you make them angry, and you're unable to continue your quest line, you would take a Celestial Dew on over here to the Church of Vows, and you would get your sins forgiven, and that would be how you go ahead and continue a quest line. Now, there's a couple Celestial Dews in other places you can find, but the fact that there's just one here for sale is great. Of course, we also have another Larval Tier here for sale, which is great if you're trying to respec. And then over here, this is going to allow you to make frost arrows, which are very useful. In terms of making arrows and bolts, I tend to go for either Frost or for Bleed. I think those are the two ideal type of arrows. Frostbite will cause a burst of damage and cause the enemy to take more damage while they're inflicted. Bleed, of course, causes a decent buildup as well. So if you're not sure what kind of arrows are good for your bow, these are an extremely solid choice if you have a bow as a backup. But so after interacting with him, go back to the Royal Moon-Gazing Grounds, and we're going to talk about Carian Retaliation and why it is so powerful. Now right now we have a parry shield, which is great for knocking enemies' weapons out of the way, opening them up to critical attacks. However, with Carian Retaliation, we will still be able to parry, but we will also gain the ability to parry magical attacks as well. So we can even fuse for magic if we want, which will increase the magic blocking of the shield. I'm fine keeping it for heavy. I know it's going to cost some FP to parry, but you can see we are generating a blue aura when we parry. And what's so powerful about this is we will now be able to parry spells that are being shot at our character, and it will generate small swords above our head that will then fire back at the enemy and deal damage. And on top of that, if you level up the shield, similar to how we've leveled up our sword here, the strength of the swords on Carian Retaliation will also grow. So, I'm trying to think. I really want to find a enemy that I can show this on very quickly, because it's a very, very powerful tool. Let's go... Good debate parlor. This is honestly one of my favorite Ashes of War. There's so many attacks throughout the game, even boss attacks in some cases, that boom, you completely shut it down. But just to briefly show this, we'll head back on over here to before the Red Wolf, and we'll get one of these enemies. Go on, cast. You can see I have negated the spell and generated these swords. You can see very, very useful, and you can do almost anything that's going to be a standalone projectile. You can do a spell parry too. So the moons that Rennala shoots, you can spell parry those. The comets that the Red Wolf was firing out of his mouth, you can spell parry those. There is, I mean, if a dragon jumps in the air and does a singular blast at you that's not a breath, you can parry it. So incredibly strong defensive Ash of War. In fact, I would argue one of the best defensive Ashes of War, because it really opens up your defensive capabilities. Spells that typically you would be panic rolling through to try and avoid, parry it. And what's great is not only will this parry spells, but that animation still works for regular sword parries. So if an enemy is trying to attack you, you can still just parry them as you normally would. But with that being covered from here, let's go ahead and run. We're just going to go past the dragon. As I mentioned, the dragon's going to fly away if you start fighting it, and we can't actually defeat it until later anyway. Now, briefly, just to look at this area, there are a couple of goodies hidden here. I'll leave you to find for yourself. And there's actually a whole extra area over here that we are able to do. So if you want to go on over there and explore, there's some good stuff over there. There's a few mini bosses. There's an Everjail. Lots and lots of stuff that you can take on in. But what we're doing right now is heading on over to this tower to introduce you to Ranni. After you reach the tower, let's go ahead and head on inside and then make your way up and around. Grab this grace. And then from here, we're going to head on up these stairs and stand on this pressure plate. Now, the dialogue that you get here is going to depend on a couple of things. If you've been talking to Rogier, he will eventually lead you to this NPC. But if you haven't been following Rogier's questline, you'll be able to immediately start this quest now. For now, at least, let's just talk to her, and we'll run through some of the dialogue. Just mention that she mentioned her name was Renna. It's actually Ranni, but go ahead and talk to her. if you had been talking to Rogier, you're not going to have no particular reason. Instead, there's going to be an alternative line of dialogue. You would go back to him, talk to him some more, and then you would come back and continue the conversation. But regardless, eventually, after talking to her, she will then allow you to serve Ranni the Witch, and by doing so, you then trigger the start of the Ranni questline. Go ahead and talk to her a second time. She is going to mention all of her followers that are here. We need to go ahead and talk to them before we can actually leave. If you look right now, everything is blocked off. So a lot of people get here and they're like, wait, I can't go anywhere. You just got to talk to some NPCs. So let's travel back down. And the reason this questline is so important, one, eventually this questline will lead you to this upper area right here. It's going to lead you to some trophy bosses, legendary weapon, some legendary spells. So without doing this questline, it's actually impossible to get your platinum. But go ahead, we'll talk to E.G. And you can take your time with all this dialogue. I'm just running through it for the sake of keeping things a little bit quicker. Talk to Blythe.
Well, I'm situated in the Eternal City. I'm planning to go see if I can.
And we can talk to Celivis.
Yes, I am. I don't know what it's since I asked.
After talking to all three of them, we can then go back and talk to Ranni. Celivis likes to hear the sound of his own voice, which is why he continued talking there. If you want, you can continue. He mentions don't keep him waiting because he wants to meet up with us, which we'll actually see him in the next part. We talk to E.G. again. He just mentions together for Lady Ranni. And from here, we go back and we talk to Ranni herself. You can see everything is still blocked off for now.
I shall soon, and it will be this doll's, but still I look for.
So after you get that final piece of dialogue, you can see that we are now map unlocked. We are able to travel, and at this point we have successfully begun the Ranni questline. Now this is quite a long questline, and while there are standalone guides out there, we are going to be covering the core components of this questline in this series all the way up into the conclusion of it. One additional part, Celivis mentioned to meet him at his tower. That is that tower right over there that you're seeing where I just generated that blue line. That is a separate side quest, but it ties in to the Ranni side quest. Doing parts of it, he'll give you access to some pretty interesting spells. So if you're a caster, I think it's worth doing. He also has some interesting puppet ashen summons, one that is a healer, one that will throw pots at enemies that can do various forms of damage. And probably the biggest thing, if you eventually get an item for a portion of his quest, and you can use it to create a custom follower. So what I mean by follower is our ashen summons, either Nefeli or Dung Eater, who are both very strong ashen summons. So there are quite a lot of steps to that particular side quest, but there are some interesting rewards at the end. Either way, it's definitely worthwhile to come over here because, as I mentioned, the Ranni side quest is incredibly important. But moving on from here, in the next part, we have a couple different areas we could go. We could take this little hole right here and make our way up north. We could, of course, make our way out to Caelid, or we could make our way somewhere you haven't seen yet, which is going to be underground, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So make sure to stay tuned. In the next episode, we are going to be making our way down into the Einzel River Well, and we're going to be taking out a hidden boss down there. And then following up on that, we're going to be going to the Shifra River Well. So you're going to be getting a chance to see some of the underground regions of Elden Ring coming up next.